Good morning and welcome to the Lightcast studio for this employment situation live analysis. If you have not heard, like MZ Burning Glass is now Lightcast. Today we're going to talk about the employment situation, a U.S. Department of Labor report released every month to give us a glimpse into what's happening in the labor economy. On this September 2nd, 2022, I'm your host, Christopher Laney, and I am joined by two of our leading economists, senior labor economist Ron Hetrick and Elizabeth Crowfoot. Elizabeth, Ron, welcome to the studio.
Good morning.
Hi, Chris.
Ron, we will start with you. Your initial take on the report, specifically the number of jobs that were added to our economy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was a little bit encouraged by that, and I'll tell you why. Last month's big gain that we were looking at and saying, how could this gain actually be there? That didn't revise down. And then we see this, what I would call a really good gain, because you have to add those 2 months together and you get, over 800,000 jobs added in the past 2 months. So I think from a jobs perspective, this was actually really encouraging.
Elizabeth, this is your first time joining us for the jobs report. I'm excited to have you. I want to start with a question something that you've been focused on, and that is around missing workers. You've been doing a lot of research around this. Now, we didn't see a huge gain so far in those that are quote unquote missing from the labor force, but still looking for a job. But we still have 1.4 million individuals that are essentially on the sideline. I wanted to get your thoughts on what is happening with this specific population group.
No, it's a really great question. And I actually want to rewind a little bit to earlier in the week where we had the JOLTS data come out on openings. And we did find out then that there are 5.6 million more job openings than available workers. And today we learned that there are exactly 5.6 million people that are not in the labor force that want a job. And they're out of the labor force for various reasons, right? Some of them are still challenged by health concerns related to COVID or childcare challenges, or just feeling like they're not qualified for a job, right? A lot of people may feel like they don't have sufficient education or training. So there are still a lot of reasons that are hindering people from entering the workforce. So that's definitely a challenge that employers are going to have to continue to face.
Yeah, that's interesting because we did see in this report that the unemployment rate kind of went up a little bit in certain areas with certain demographic groups, but not with those that have college degrees. So when you were talking about those that might feel underqualified, I guess that starts the conversation around skills and how do we help these individuals understand their skills so that they can get into the labor force.
Exactly. And the only other point I really want to make about the unemployment rate is, it did tick up, but it was for the right reasons. We had this huge increase in the labor force participation rate. So it's really encouraging to see that there are more people that are, putting their name out there, applying for jobs and looking for work.
Well, Ron, speaking of labor force participation, I don't know if we would say it's our favorite indicator, but it's definitely one we talk about a lot. What is your take on this month's labor force participation, and specifically with certain demographic groups like youth?
Yeah, it's interesting to be watching what's happened. So, we had this kind of disturbing trend the past couple months watching our LFPR, labor force participation rate, something no one really talked about. Now it seems to be an infatuation, well, especially with me. But we saw this thing going down, and then we see this big jump this month. And it's interesting because you see almost a universal surging back of people kind of coming back into the labor force. And you see it for men and women and people of different races. Like a lot of people kind of rejoin this labor force in August. Now, why that happened? Why did we see the drops previously and now why are we seeing these gains? Is this that people took the vacations they wanted to take in the summer and now they're kind of re-entering? Those are the things that, I think are going to be kind of hard to unpack. But I thought what was really interesting was outside of one group, and that one group was people without a high school diploma. They actually saw a pretty big drop in their labor force, but people with only a high school diploma all the way up through college, huge increases in people coming back. Now, for the college number we just talked about, their unemployment rate actually went down. So not only did we consume all of those people, but we actually did it at a rate that brought their unemployment rate down. For those with only a high school diploma and such, that big surge back did lead to a bit of a jump up in their unemployment rate.
Yeah, it would be interesting as we always say this is a glimpse for 1 month. So going into the next couple of months, watching and monitoring and seeing if we continuously see those rises in labor force participation will be interesting. Elizabeth, we saw modest gains in wages this month. One of the challenges that I know the Fed is trying to do is trying to manage inflation, and wages continuously increasing can be difficult to do. What is your take on this, and what do you think the Fed's going to have to do to try to get inflation under control when wages still keep going up?
Right. We did see, like you said, a small uptick in wages. There's still about 5% annual increase. So that's been pretty consistent. And again, I just want to reiterate that I don't put a ton of stock into the average hourly earnings figure in this report, because it doesn't, control for different mix of occupations and industries and different types of workers. So you do have to take it with a grain of salt. But other indicators are also signaling around a 5% wage inflation. And yeah, this is a challenge for the Fed. Again, with a bump in overall payrolls, wages still seem to be going up. It just gives the Fed that much more ammunition to continue to increase interest rates and to continue to be more aggressive going forward and to keep those rates elevated. So it's just more fuel to that fire for the Fed. So we'll have to see later this month what they ultimately decide to do.
Ron, diving into kind of the specifics of the industry is something that you kind of hit on, and Elizabeth just hit on a little bit too. We saw an increase in retail, another decrease in warehousing. What is your thoughts on this? What does this mean for our economy?
Yeah, we've been watching retail, especially general merchandise stores, inventories ballooning into record territory. In fact, the most recent number actually took it farther into record territory. But what you start to sense is the fact that, we are getting kind of indications across the economy that all of the orders and everything that were in those warehouses have maybe started to move out of those warehouses and into the stores. And the retail stores themselves, they need to move that inventory. So, I've kind of gone back and forth that, hey, as we've been cooling off our goods purchases, as we switch back to services, going out to eat, going on vacations more, that we would see, retail establishments cutting back. But I think what's happening is they actually need the people.
I think, did we lose him?
Looks like we lost Ron.
That's what happens when you're live. And he's back.
So that was the oddest thing. Okay, so just saying, make that final point. I think you lost me right at the end.
Yeah.
But no, I do feel that we are still a country. I've even seen some reports from some companies saying, look, our flow of customers is not slowing down. We're talking about retail companies are still saying we're still seeing really good demand. So I don't think the party's quite over yet. And as much as that is typically encouraging and certainly not the sign that we'd be going to a recession if people are still happily spending money, the concern is still something that Elizabeth was pointing to earlier, and that is you have a lot of pressure still to hire, and especially in, you see retail trade gains in employment, but you're also seeing gains in employment in like hotels and restaurants and other industries that are looking after these workers. Well, there's a lot of places that are like, look, I can't keep paying more money, but yet there still seems to be so much pressure on these places to compete for talent.
It'd be interesting to see, Ron, you just mentioned that this, I don't know if it was before we were talking, but the summer was like the summer of vacations, right? All that pent up time that people spend at home and wanting to get back out there. It'll be interesting over the next few months if we see that demand go down a little bit as everybody's getting back to school. Yeah. So something worth monitoring. Elizabeth, we did see a modest increase in unemployment among women that are managing families. Do you think that this is an indicator of what's happening in the childcare industry, or do you think it's something else that might be happening? What's your thoughts on that?
This just goes back to my previous comment about, sometimes seeing a rise in the unemployment rate just means that there are more workers putting their hat in the ring. And I think that's what's happening in this case with women. They're starting to feel a little bit less pressure with childcare, more facilities coming online. School's going to be starting soon as well. So I really think it's just a matter of women deciding, it's time to re-engage and go back into the labor force. So it doesn't concern me as much, that we do see an uptick in unemployment. Again, it's for the right reasons.
Do you think that, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about those missing workers or those that are marginally detached from kind of the workforce, we saw an uptick in those that are going towards long-term employment, and we saw that uptick as well. We have so many job openings, so it's still kind of mind-boggling to me that we have individuals that are struggling to find jobs. With that group, what do you think might be happening?
Yeah, that was really discouraging to see that number in the long-term unemployed tick up again, especially when last month, it was heading in the right direction. It was going down. And that's important because it means that the labor market scarring from the pandemic, from people having to disengage from the labor market, not being able to come back, we want to see those numbers come down so we don't have that long-term scarring. So it's really up to employers to create more flexible work arrangements, not just remote work, right? Not all employees can do that. It's about also developing compressed work schedules, for example, or shift sharing in sectors like manufacturing or construction, giving workers options so that they can fit a job into their life that has so many other priorities in it, right? Especially now with healthcare concerns and childcare, really, and just well-being coming to the forefront, especially in the job at the workplace.
Ron, as we wrap up, what are your final thoughts? What should we take away from this specific report?
Yeah, I'm going to keep going back to this forest for the trees thing. Initial unemployment claims have been dropping the past several weeks. We have even though the unemployment rate goes from 3.5 to 3.7, understand 3.5 was an all-time historical low outside of wartime. 3.7 is still an incredibly low unemployment rate. I think there was some workers maybe displaced a little. There was some kind of announced layoffs that occurred in some of these lower skilled industries. It's not uncommon because you're dealing in local markets to see some gains in unemployment when people get laid off in some of these lower skilled industries. But I think the unemployment claims number are telling us that these people are probably finding new jobs. I think we still have to understand that there's still a lot of pressure to keep paying competitively, keep making sure you're doing the right things to retain your workers so that you don't end up on the short stick here.
Yeah, Elizabeth, your final thoughts. What should we take away from this report?
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to mention was, the broad-based nature of the employment rate gains across all sectors of the economy. That's still really encouraging. The one slight blemish, if I would say one, is that the leisure and hospitality industry saw the smallest gain since November 2020. So that just goes to show that there is demand out there, but employers are having a really hard time filling those open positions in that industry in particular. And it really shows that, it's very unlikely that that industry will come back to pre-pandemic levels anytime soon. And then just, beating that drum of missing workers, of all of those people that are out of the labor force but want a job and would take them under the right conditions if employers are able to make certain accommodations for them. So again, just continuing to focus on flexible work schedules and other strategies that are going to bring more people into the labor market, because we're going to need them, right? Where demographics are predictable, and it's just with retiring baby boomers, it's just going to get tighter and tighter as we go forward into the next few years.
Ron, Elizabeth, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for your live analysis. You can get all the details and more information at lightcast.io. Thank you for joining us this month, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.